The first sound Lady Seraphine Vale heard after her child hatched was not a cry. It was the roar of every dragon in the royal mountain, lowering its head toward the throne room, as if something older than kings had awakened beneath the stone. Black fire spilled across the marble cradle in silent, beautiful waves, not burning the infant, not burning the silk, not even touching Seraphine's trembling hands, as she folded her body over the tiny life she had brought into the world. Around her, the court of Dravenhold recoiled in horror. Lords in scaled armor stumbled backward. Dragon priestesses covered their eyes. The royal council rose like a wall of knives, their silver masks flashing beneath the stormlight. And upon the obsidian throne, King Kael Draven stood motionless, his face carved from shadow, his golden eyes fixed on the child he had sworn never to love. Then the High Chancellor pointed a shaking hand at the cradle and said the words that turned every breath in the hall to ice. Forbidden black flame, the prophecy has returned. Kill the child before it destroys us all. Seraphine gathered the baby closer, though her body was weak from labor, and her heart was breaking beneath the weight of a kingdom's terror. She looked up at the man who had married her for revenge, the Dragon King who had taken her name, her freedom, and her future to punish the bloodline that ruined his war. For one terrible moment, she believed he would do what kings always did. Choose the throne, choose fear, choose power. But Kael descended the steps slowly, drew the ancient black blade at his side, and placed himself between his wife, his child, and the entire kingdom that demanded their blood. Before that night, Seraphine Vale had been known only as the last daughter of a fallen house. Not a princess, not a witch, not a bride anyone had wanted. Her family's banners had once flown over the western valleys, pale blue silk embroidered with silver hawks. But after the Dragon War, those banners were dragged through mud and burned beneath the gates of Dravenhold. The Vales had surrendered too late, or so the dragon clans claimed. They had bent the knee only after their armies were broken, their fortresses emptied, and their sons buried in ash. To humans, House Vale had sacrificed everything to end a slaughter. To dragons, they were oathbreakers who had fed soldiers to the war until defeat became certain. Seraphine had grown up inside that shame like a second skin. In every court she entered, the whisper followed her before her footsteps did. Traitor's blood, fallen blood, a house that begged only after it had no sword left to lift. She had learned not to flinch when noblewomen turned away from her cup, when soldiers lowered their voices at the sight of her mourning veil, when old men smiled gently and told her she carried a debt no marriage could ever repay. When the peace treaty was written, her name was placed at the bottom, like a seal of punishment. The Dragon King would take the last Vale daughter as his bride, not for love, not for alliance, but as a living reminder that human pride had knelt. Seraphine did not weep when the decree was read. She stood in the cold chapel of her ruined estate with her hands folded and her spine straight, while the king's envoy listed the conditions of her surrender. She would leave her lands by winter moonrise. She would never return without royal permission. She would bear the title of Queen Consort of Dravenhold, but hold no authority over dragon law, clan tribute, military command, or succession rights, unless the king granted it. And if she failed to produce an heir, House Vale's remaining lands would be absorbed into the dragon crown forever. Her uncle lowered his eyes. Her servants sobbed behind their sleeves. Seraphine only asked one question. "Will my people be spared?" The envoy looked almost surprised. "If you obey." She nodded once. That was all. In that moment, she understood what everyone else in the room refused to say aloud. She was not being married. She was being delivered. Dravenhold rose from the northern mountains like a fortress carved out of night. Its towers curved like dragon horns against a storm-dark sky, and rivers of molten fire glowed through channels cut into the black stone walls. Seraphine arrived in a carriage without family, without music, without the blessings normally given to a bride. Dragon guards escorted her through gates large enough for beasts to pass in flight, their armor ridged with scales, their faces unreadable. Above her, real dragons circled the peak, vast shadows moving through clouds stained red by sunset. She had heard tales of them since childhood, but tales had never captured the terrible grace of their bodies, the heat of their breath, the intelligence in their burning eyes. They watched her, as if they knew she did not belong. Perhaps they did. The wedding took place that same night, in the Hall of Clans. Thousands gathered beneath banners of crimson, bronze, white, and gold, each representing one of the great dragon bloodlines. No veil banner was allowed inside. No human priest spoke. The ceremony was conducted by the old dragon rites, harsh and ancient, with vows spoken over a basin of fire. Seraphine wore a gown of ivory silk chosen by the court, beautiful enough to make her look like a sacrifice. Across from her stood Kael Draven, Dragon King of the Ashen Throne, conqueror of the Western Valleys, last warlord of the fire-blooded line. He was taller than any man in the hall, broad-shouldered, black-haired, with a face too severe to be called handsome until one saw the ruinous beauty of his eyes. Gold, not warm like sunlight, but molten like a blade drawn from a forge. A scar cut through his left brow and disappeared near his temple, pale against his bronze skin. He did not smile when she approached. He did not offer his hand until the priestess commanded it. His palm was hot around hers, not comforting, not gentle, a warning. When the priestess asked whether he accepted Seraphine Vale as wife beneath flame, blood, and crown, Kael looked at her for the first time fully. His gaze moved over her face with cold precision, as if searching for the ghosts of every enemy who had ever worn her name. Then he said, "I accept the debt she carries." A quiet ripple passed through the court. Seraphine's fingers tightened, but she did not lower her head. When it was her turn, the hall waited hungrily for her humiliation. They expected her voice to tremble. They expected tears. They expected the last veiled daughter to crack beneath the weight of the Dragon King's contempt. Instead, she lifted her chin and said, "I accept the crown I did not ask for, and the peace my people were promised." For the first time, something changed in Kael's expression. Not softness, not approval, only a flicker, sharp and brief, as if she had stepped where he had expected her to kneel. The marriage fire rose between them, binding their shadows together on the stone floor. That night, Seraphine was given chambers beside the king's wing, but not inside it. Servants dressed in black and crimson attended her with perfect obedience and no warmth. Her food was tested before it touched her table, though no one told her whether the court feared she would be poisoned or feared she might poison others. The doors were guarded. The windows opened onto a drop, so deep clouds moved below the balcony. She sat alone beneath embroidered curtains and listened to the mountain breathe. Somewhere in the halls, dragons shifted in their sleep. Somewhere beyond the walls, her people waited to see whether her sacrifice had bought them mercy. Kael did not come to her that first night, nor the second. On the third evening, he summoned her to supper in the war gallery, not the royal dining hall. Maps covered the stone tables. Spears taken from conquered human houses hung between dragon skulls polished like ivory. Seraphine entered quietly and found him standing before a map of the Western Valleys, her homeland marked in black ink. He did not turn around at once. "Do you hate me?" he asked. The question was so direct that she almost answered honestly. Instead, she folded her hands before her. "Would it change anything if I did?" "No." "Then my hatred would be a luxury." He turned then, and the torchlight sharpened every line of his face. "Careful, Lady Vale. Dragons admire courage only when it does not become foolishness, and humans admire mercy only when it is not mistaken for weakness." For a breath, silence stretched between them. The guards near the door shifted uneasily. Kael looked at her as if no one had spoken to him that way in years and survived the mistake. Then, unexpectedly, he dismissed the guards with a flick of his hand. When they were alone, he poured wine into one cup and pushed it toward her. None for himself. "My council believes fear will keep the Western Valleys obedient," he said. "Will it? It kept the dragon clans alive. It also kept the war alive." His jaw tightened. "Your father kept the war alive." Seraphine's chest hollowed, but she did not look away. "My father is dead. If you brought me here to argue with a grave, your majesty, you will find it very silent." Kael's eyes flashed, and heat stirred in the room. The flames in the wall sconces bent toward him. Seraphine felt the sudden primal urge to step back, but she forced herself still. Dragons respected fear, she had been told. They respected it because they could smell it. What no one had taught her was how to survive when fear had nowhere left to go. "You carry his blood," Kael said. "I carry my mother's too. No one remembers that because she healed soldiers from both sides. Healing does not erase betrayal." "No," Seraphine said softly. "But neither does revenge resurrect the betrayed." The temperature changed. Not colder, more dangerous. Kael crossed the distance between them slowly, stopping close enough that she felt the heat of him through the thin sleeves of her gown. He studied her face, searching again, always searching, as if the answer to some private wound might be hidden beneath her skin. "You think yourself innocent? I think innocence has never protected anyone in a royal court." His mouth curved faintly, not into a smile, but something bitter. "Then perhaps you will survive here longer than I expected." That was the beginning of their marriage. Not affection, not trust, but a blade held between two wounded creatures who refused to bleed first. In the weeks that followed, Seraphine learned the rules of Dravenhold. Dragon clans did not bow the way humans did. They inclined their heads only to power, age, or fire. Children born to dragon blood did not enter the world as human infants did. They hatched from living flame, carried first in the mother's womb, and then sealed within a birth egg of crystallized heat during the final moon. A royal heir's flame revealed its clan inheritance. Crimson fire meant war blood. Gold meant sovereign blood. White meant prophecy, though no white flame child had lived in centuries. Black flame was not spoken of, except in forbidden texts, chained beneath the temple. Seraphine heard this from a servant who stopped speaking the moment she realized what she had said. When Seraphine asked why black flame was forbidden, the woman went pale and dropped a silver tray hard enough to dent it. "Forgive me, my queen. I know nothing. No one in Dravenhold knew anything when fear stood nearby." The court treated Seraphine with a polished cruelty that never gave her a wound anyone could accuse them of making. At feasts, she was seated beside Kael, but served last. At council gatherings, she was present, but never addressed. When dragon noblewomen passed her in the corridors, their silence was sharper than insults. They did not mock her for being human. That would have been too simple. They treated her as if she were already a relic, a political object placed in the room to remind everyone what had been conquered. Her pain was not loud enough to defend against. It lived in the pause before someone used her title, in the way conversations stopped when she entered, in the way the dragon children stared at her with open curiosity and their mothers pulled them away. One afternoon, during the winter tribute ceremony, the cruelty became public. The great clans gathered to renew their loyalty to Kael. Each clan offered flame into the central brazier, and the color of their fire rose bright before the throne. Seraphine stood beside the king beneath the carved wings of the royal dais. She had been instructed to place a human offering into the brazier after the dragon clans. A white hawk feather from House Vale, the last symbol of her fallen bloodline. She knew what it meant. The court wanted to watch the feather burn. They wanted to see the last remnant of her house vanish in dragon fire while she stood smiling like an obedient bride. The High Chancellor announced it with a voice smooth as oil. "Let the Queen Consort honor the peace bought by her house's surrender." 1,000 eyes turned toward her. Seraphine stepped forward with the feather resting across her palms. It was old, taken from her mother's prayer box, the only thing she had brought from home without permission. For one moment, grief nearly broke through her composure. She saw her mother's hands, tying blue thread around the feather's stem. She saw her father riding through smoke. She saw the valley after the war, fields blackened, wells poisoned, children too quiet from hunger. Then she saw Kael, watching her from the throne, his face unreadable. The brazier roared. Seraphine lowered the feather toward the flames. The fire went out. Not dimmed, not weakened, extinguished. Gasps cracked through the hall. The great brazier, fed by dragon oil and old magic, sat cold and dark before her. Smoke curled around Seraphine's wrists like gray silk. The feather in her hands did not burn. Instead, the blue thread around its stem began to glow faintly, a soft, silver light, like moonlight beneath water. The High Chancellor's eyes narrowed. Kael rose from the throne. Seraphine stared at the dead brazier, her heart beating so hard she could barely breathe. She had done nothing. She had spoken no charm, summoned no spirit, called no god. Yet the silence in the hall told her innocence would not matter. One of the elder lords whispered, "Human witchcraft." Another said, "Veil blood." The Chancellor lifted his voice. "The offering has been refused." Seraphine turned slowly. By whom? The question unsettled them. It unsettled her too. Before anyone could answer, a sound rolled through the mountain. Low, vast, a dragon's growl, but not from the beast circling outside. This came from beneath the hall, from deep within the bones of Dravenhold itself. The floor trembled once under Seraphine's feet. The dead brazier sparked, and for half a heartbeat, a single thread of black flame curled from the ash before vanishing. Kael saw it. So did the High Chancellor. And from that moment, Seraphine was no longer merely the last daughter of a fallen bloodline. She became a question the kingdom was afraid to ask. That night, Kael came to her chambers for the first time since their wedding. Seraphine was standing on the balcony with a cloak around her shoulders, watching storm clouds gather below the mountain. She did not turn when the doors opened. She knew his footsteps now. Heavy, controlled, never hurried. A king's steps. A warrior's restraint. "You should not stand so close to the edge," he said. "Is that concern or strategy?" "It is irritation. I have no wish to explain to the council why my queen fell from a balcony after extinguishing the tribute flame. I did not extinguish it. I know." That made her turn. Kael stood just inside the balcony doors, his black cloak still wet from rain, his hair loose around his face. Without the throne behind him and the court around him, he looked less like a legend and more like a man being slowly consumed by something he refused to name. "You know?" she asked. His gaze moved to her hands. "Dragonfire does not obey human spellcraft." "Then what happened?" "I do not know." It was the first honest thing he had given her. Seraphine looked back toward the clouds. "Your council has already decided." "My council decides many things. Not all of them become law, but enough do." A faint muscle moved in his jaw. "You think me their puppet?" "I think every throne has chains. Some are only made of gold." Kael stepped onto the balcony. The storm wind moved between them, carrying the scent of rain, smoke, and something distinctly him. Iron heat, cedar ash, a trace of wild fire buried under discipline. Seraphine hated that she noticed. She hated even more that something in her chest eased when he stood beside her, instead of across from her. "My council wants your household servants replaced," he said. "They want your letters opened, your movements restricted, and your blood tested beneath temple law." Her fingers tightened around the stone railing. "And what do you want?" He did not answer quickly. "I want to know why the mountain answered you." "The mountain?" "Dravenhold is built over the first dragon grave. Old fire sleeps below us. It does not stir for politics." Seraphine remembered the black flame in the ash. "And if I cannot tell you, then others will carve the answer out of you." The words were brutal, but his voice was not. She looked at him sharply. "Is that a threat?" "It is a warning. From my husband or my jailer?" His eyes darkened. "Tonight, perhaps both." Pain moved through her before she could stop it. Not because she had expected tenderness from him, but because some foolish, exhausted part of her had wanted the warning to mean protection. She stepped away from the railing. "Then hear this, Your Majesty. I did not ask your mountain to answer me. I did not ask for your throne, your hatred, or your name. I came here because my people were promised peace, and I will endure whatever your court spits at me if it keeps children in the valleys from starving. But I will not confess to a crime simply because dragons are frightened by what they do not understand." Kael stared at her. Then his gaze dropped, not to her mouth, not to her body, but to the place where her hand pressed unconsciously over her heart. "You are afraid," he said quietly. "Of course I am. Yet you speak as if you are not." "No, I speak because I am." Something in him shifted then, subtle but unmistakable. The anger did not leave his face, but it lost its edge. For one strange moment, he looked at her not as the daughter of his enemy, not as a treaty bride, not as a problem to be solved, but as a woman standing barefoot in the storm with nothing except her dignity and the dangerous habit of telling him the truth. Thunder rolled beneath them. Seraphine swayed. Cale caught her before she hit the stone. His hands closed around her arms, hot through the fabric of her gown. The contact should have frightened her. Instead, the world seemed to sharpen. The storm, the mountain, the distant dragons, her own pulse. Kyle went utterly still. His fingers tightened for a fraction of a second, and a flicker of pain crossed his face so quickly she almost missed it. Then he released her and stepped back, as if touching her had burned him. "What is it?" she whispered. Nothing, but his right hand had curled into a fist, and beneath the skin near his wrist, faint black veins glowed like cracks in cooling lava. Seraphine saw them before he pulled his sleeve down. Cale's voice turned cold again. "Rest. Do not leave these chambers without guards. And if the mountain answers again?" He paused at the door. "Then pray it answers before the council does." He left her with the storm, and the first fragile thread of a secret neither of them yet understood. The next morning, the mountain woke angry. Dravenhold's bells rang before dawn, deep iron sounds that rolled through the fortress like warnings from a buried god. Servants rushed through the corridors carrying censers of dragon incense. Soldiers in black armor sealed the lower temple gates. Above the eastern towers, the dragons circling the mountain refused to land. They wheeled endlessly through the gray sky, shrieking toward the cliffs as if hunting something no one else could see. By sunrise, rumors had already spread through the kingdom. The human queen had silenced sacred dragon fire. The mountain had answered her blood. Black flame had appeared in the tribute brazier. And in a kingdom ruled by prophecy, rumor was often more dangerous than truth. Seraphine sat before the mirror, while her maid braided silver chains into her dark hair with trembling hands. The girl could not have been older than 16. Usually she avoided eye contact, but this morning fear had made her clumsy enough to speak. "My queen," she whispered carefully. "The lower servants are saying the temple priestesses asked for permission to inspect your chambers." Seraphine met the girl's gaze in the mirror. "Did the king allow it?" "No one knows." That was the worst answer possible. The maid swallowed. "Some believe the old prophecies have returned." "What prophecies?" The girl's face paled instantly. "Forgive me. I should not speak of them, yet everyone else already is." The maid lowered her voice until it was barely audible. "The prophecy of the Black Pyre. The child born in forbidden flame, the one who unites the dragon clans." Her eyes flickered toward the locked chamber doors, or burns them into extinction. Cold moved slowly through Seraphine's spine. "A child?" she repeated softly. The maid nodded once. "The old stories say the black flame appears before the kingdom falls." Then footsteps sounded beyond the doors. The girl immediately dropped to her knees. Captain Valor entered with 4 royal guards behind him. Unlike most dragon warriors, Valor wore no gold, only black steel etched with ash-gray scales. A scar crossed his throat from jaw to collarbone, the kind left by dragon fire. He was Cale's commander and oldest surviving ally, though no warmth lived in his expression now. "My queen," he said flatly. "The king requests your presence in the council chamber." "Requests?" Seraphine asked. Valor's eyes flicked briefly toward the guards. "Immediately." That answered enough. The council chamber of Dravenhold had once been part of the mountain itself. Jagged stone walls curved high overhead like the inside of a dragon's ribcage, lined with ancient skulls whose empty eyes stared down upon every royal judgment. Long black tables formed a circle around a pit of living fire at the chamber's center. Today the fire burned crimson. Every seat was occupied. The High Chancellor sat nearest the throne platform, silver robes pooling around him like liquid moonlight. Beside him waited the elder clan lords, dragon priestesses, military commanders, and blood judges. Seraphine felt their attention settle over her before she had even crossed the threshold. Kyle stood at the far end of the chamber near the fire pit. He had not slept. She saw it immediately in the shadows beneath his eyes, in the tension buried beneath his stillness. Yet he remained terrifyingly composed, every inch the Dragon King who had conquered half the continent before 30. When Seraphine approached, the High Chancellor spoke first. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly to Kyle, though his eyes never left Seraphine. "We appreciate your willingness to resolve this matter swiftly." Matter, as if she were already evidence awaiting sentence. Kyle's voice cut through the chamber. "Speak carefully, Chancellor." The older man inclined his head slightly. "Then let us speak plainly. Sacred dragon fire was extinguished during the winter tribute. Black flame manifested before witnesses. The mountain responded to the Queen's blood. His gaze sharpened. Under temple law, these are signs of forbidden inheritance." Seraphine remained standing. "You accuse me of witchcraft without proof." "No," the Chancellor said. "We accuse you of concealment." Murmurs moved through the chamber. Kyle watched her silently. The Chancellor folded his hands. "Housevale records were destroyed after the war. Conveniently so. Your mother's bloodline remains undocumented. Your grandmother vanished during the Northern Purges. And now, ancient flame answers your presence." He leaned slightly forward. "Tell this council what blood truly runs through your veins." Seraphine's pulse thundered in her ears. "I do not know." "Lies." The word struck like a whip. Several council members nodded grimly. Others looked uncertain. Valor remained near the chamber entrance, unreadable. Kyle finally moved. The fire pit bent toward him as he descended the steps. Dragon Kings carried magic differently from humans. Their power did not flicker like spellcraft. It pressed against the world itself. The chamber grew hotter with every step he took. He stopped beside Seraphine. "Enough," he said. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "Your Majesty, the kingdom cannot ignore prophecy, and the kingdom will not condemn its queen based on fear." The room stilled. Seraphine looked at him sharply, not because he defended her, because he had called her queen without hesitation. The Chancellor rose slowly. "Mercy has weakened this throne before." Something dangerous flashed across Kyle's face then, gone so quickly only Seraphine seemed to notice it. A wound hidden beneath the king's skin. "Choose your next words wisely," Kyle said softly. But the Chancellor did not retreat. "The clans whisper already. Your dragons grow restless. The mountain has not stirred in centuries." His voice hardened. "If forbidden blood has entered the royal line, we must know before disaster follows." Royal line. The words lingered strangely in the air. Then realization spread through the chamber like poison. The council was not merely afraid of Seraphine. They were afraid she might bear Kyle's heir. One of the elder lords stood abruptly. "The queen must be tested beneath moonfire rites." "No," Kyle said instantly. Another counselor slammed his fist onto the table. "Then you place one woman above dragon law? I place my authority above panic. And if the prophecy is true?" Silence fell. Even the fire seemed to wait. Kyle's jaw tightened. For the first time since entering the chamber, Seraphine saw uncertainty flicker beneath his control. Not uncertainty about her, about the prophecy. The Chancellor saw it too. His voice softened with calculated precision. "Your Majesty, your father ignored the warnings once before." The room changed instantly. Every face froze. Kyle's expression became something terrible. Heat exploded through the chamber. The crimson fire pit surged upward in violent waves, and several council members recoiled as dragon power flooded the air. Seraphine felt it slam against her skin like the edge of a storm. "My father," Kyle said quietly, "is not a subject you will use against me." The Chancellor bowed his head carefully, but satisfaction glimmered beneath the gesture. He had found the wound. Seraphine understood then. Kyle's father had fallen because of prophecy, and the kingdom feared history repeating itself. The meeting ended without resolution, but the damage had already spread. By midday, Servants fled whenever Seraphine entered a room. Temple guards appeared outside her chambers. The corridors fell silent at her approach. Only one creature in Dravenhold treated her differently. The dragon came after sunset. Seraphine had been unable to sleep. Rain hammered against the mountain windows, while thunder rolled endlessly through the peaks. She sat near the hearth, wrapped in a dark robe, trying unsuccessfully to quiet her thoughts. Then the fire bent sideways. Not naturally, as if something massive had inhaled beside it. She rose, slowly. Another gust of heat swept through the chamber. The balcony door stood open, and beyond them, crouched against the storm-dark sky, waited a dragon. Seraphine stopped breathing. The beast was enormous, its scales black with deep crimson beneath them like dying embers buried under ash. Gold eyes watched her through the rain. Smoke curled from between its teeth. One claw alone was larger than her body. Any sensible person would have screamed. Instead, Seraphine stepped closer, not because she was fearless, because something inside her recognized the creature's sadness. The dragon lowered its head slowly, until its enormous eye aligned with the balcony floor. Rain hissed against its scales. "You should not be here," Seraphine whispered. The beast blinked once. Then she saw it, a heavy iron chain wrapped around one hind leg, old and partially fused into scar tissue. Pain tightened in her chest unexpectedly. Without thinking, she moved toward the balcony edge. The dragon did not growl, did not bare its teeth. It only watched her with ancient exhaustion. Seraphine extended her hand carefully through the rain. The beast lowered its head another inch. Its breath washed over her skin like furnace heat, and then footsteps thundered behind her. "Move away from it." Kale's voice cracked through the chamber. Seraphine turned sharply, just as he crossed the room. Fury blazed across his face, unlike anything she had seen before. He seized her wrist and pulled her backward so hard she nearly stumbled. The dragon immediately recoiled from the balcony with a deep, wounded rumble. Kael's grip tightened. "What were you thinking?" he demanded. She was hurt. "That is not a horse in a village stable, Seraphine. That is a war dragon. She did not try to harm me. She could kill you by accident." Rain soaked the front of his black tunic. He must have crossed half the fortress to reach her. The realization unsettled her. Seraphine looked past him toward the dragon still crouched beyond the balcony. "She is chained. Coiled and still. She killed 30 soldiers during the war," he said at last. Afterward, she could no longer distinguish enemies from allies. "So you imprisoned her." "I kept my counsel from executing her." The answer struck harder than she expected, because suddenly the chain around the dragon's leg looked horribly familiar. Kael released Seraphine's wrist slowly. The dragon outside watched them both. "She came because of you," Kael said quietly. Seraphine frowned. "What?" "She has refused human contact for years." The beast gave another low rumble. Kael looked toward it with visible frustration. "You should leave," he told the dragon in the old tongue. Instead, the dragon lowered her head again toward Seraphine. The king's expression darkened further. "Wonderful," he muttered bitterly. "Now even my dragons ignore me." Despite everything, a faint breath of amusement almost escaped Seraphine. Almost. Then she noticed the exhaustion buried beneath his anger. "You were afraid," she said softly. Kael's gaze snapped toward her. "For you?" he asked coldly. "No." She held his eyes carefully. "For the dragon." Silence stretched. The rain softened beyond the balcony. At last, Kael looked away first. "She was my mother's dragon," he said quietly. The confession surprised both of them. Seraphine said nothing. Kael rested one hand briefly against the balcony stone. "After my mother died, she became unstable. The council demanded her death. I refused." His jaw tightened. "They called it weakness." The word lingered heavily between them. Weakness. Merze. The same accusation haunting him everywhere. Seraphine looked at the chained dragon again and understood something dangerous. Kael Draven was feared because he was ruthless. But beneath the ruthlessness lived a man the kingdom no longer trusted. because he refused to become completely monstrous. The realization frightened her more than his cruelty ever had, because it made him human enough to hurt. The dragon finally retreated into the storm, wings vanishing into black clouds. Kale remained near the balcony. Neither spoke for several moments. Then he said quietly, "You should fear me more than you do." Seraphine studied his face. "You keep saying things like that," she murmured. "Yet every time your kingdom asks for blood, you hesitate." His eyes darkened dangerously. "Do not mistake hesitation for mercy." "Then what is it?" Something raw flickered across his expression. For one terrible heartbeat, she thought he might actually answer. Instead, he stepped back. "The council will not stop," he said. "They are already preparing moonfire rites." Seraphine's stomach tightened. "What happens during those rites?" Kyle's silence told her enough. Fear finally slipped through her composure. Not loud, not dramatic, just visible enough for him to notice. And strangely, that seemed to disturb him more than defiance ever had. "They can't force this," she whispered. "They can if enough clans support it. And you?" His jaw hardened. "I can stop them," he said. "For now." For now. The words echoed long after he left. 3 nights later, the first attack came. Seraphine woke to smoke. At first she thought the hearth fire had spread. Then shouting erupted beyond her chambers. Steel clashed against stone. A servant screamed. The doors burst open. Captain Valor strode inside with blood on his sword. "My queen," he said sharply, "you must come now." Fear slammed through her chest. What happened? Dans Her blood went cold. Before she could speak again, the corridor exploded in dragonfire. The blast shook the entire corridor. Stone cracked. Heat tore through the royal wing in a violent wave, throwing sparks across the ceiling tapestries. Seraphine stumbled backward as Valor seized her arm and dragged her away from the chamber doors, just before a burning body crashed across the threshold. One of the royal guards, or what remained of him. The smell of scorched steel and flesh flooded the room. Outside, screaming echoed through the corridor. "Move, Valor Barkel." Seraphine gathered her robe and ran. More guards appeared through the smoke, black-armored dragon warriors forming a protective wall around her as flames consumed part of the hallway behind them. Servants fled in terror. Somewhere nearby, another explosion rattled the mountain. Not dragon fire. Moonfire. Silver flames burst through the smoke ahead, unnatural and cold. A temple assassin stepped from the haze wearing ceremonial white armor etched with sacred symbols. His face was hidden behind a silver mask. He raised a spear, glowing with pale fire. "For the purity of the crown," he declared. Valor's sword pierced his throat before the final word finished, leaving his mouth. Blood splashed the walls. Another assassin emerged instantly behind him. Then another. Temple executioners. Not soldiers. Not rebels. Official holy killers sanctioned by the old moon priestesses. Seraphine's heart slammed painfully as realization struck. The council had already decided she was too dangerous to survive. "Down," Valor roared. A spear of silver flame flew over her head and shattered against the wall, freezing stone black with frostfire. The guards charged forward while Valor shoved Seraphine toward a side passage. "This way." She ran blindly beside him through narrow corridors lit by emergency braziers. Alarm bells thundered through Dravenhold. Above them, dragons roared across the mountain skies, their fury shaking dust from the ceilings. "Where is the king?" Seraphine gasped. "Fighting." The answer terrified her, more than it should have. Another explosion sounded somewhere deeper within the fortress. Then, the mountain itself growled. Not metaphorically. Not thunder. A deep, ancient vibration rolled upward beneath their feet, powerful enough to crack the corridor walls. Valor cursed under his breath. "The lower fire chambers are waking." Seraphine nearly stumbled. "Because of the attack? Because something beneath this mountain is angry." Before she could ask more, the corridor ahead darkened. The torches died all at once. Valor stopped instantly, sword raised. The guards shifted protectively around Seraphine. Then silver footsteps echoed through the darkness. Measured, elegant, unhurried. A woman emerged from the shadows wearing white ceremonial robes lined with dragonbone thread. Her hair flowed silver blonde to her waist, and moonstone jewels glittered against her throat like frozen tears. High Priestess Illyra, the most feared woman in Dravenhold after the king himself. Her pale eyes settled on Seraphine with cold disappointment. "My queen," Illyra said softly. "You should not have resisted." Valor stepped forward immediately. "Stand aside, priestess. You would draw steel against the Moon Temple. I would draw steel against anyone threatening the king's wife." Something unreadable flickered across Illyra's face. "Even now?" she asked quietly. "After the mountain answered her blood?" Seraphine felt the guards tense. Illyra's gaze moved slowly toward her. "You do not understand what awakens around you, child." "I understand enough," Seraphine replied, forcing steadiness into her voice. "The council sent assassins into the royal wing. The council acted to protect the kingdom. They tried to murder me in my sleep. They tried to prevent prophecy." The words landed heavily in the corridor. Behind Illyra, more temple warriors appeared through the shadows. Valor cursed softly. Outnumbered, Illyra folded her hands within her sleeves. "Come willingly, Queen Seraphine. The Moonfire rites will reveal the truth. If your blood is innocent, no harm will come to you." No one believed that, not even Illyra. Seraphine looked at the silver fire glowing faintly around the priestess's fingertips. Ancient power, dangerous power, temple magic older than the kingdom itself. And suddenly she understood something terrible. These people were not afraid because they hated her. They were afraid because they truly believed the prophecy would destroy them all. That kind of fear made mercy impossible. Valor lifted his sword fully. Last warning. Illyra sight. Then the temple warriors attacked. Steel screamed against steel. The corridor erupted into chaos. Valor moved like a monster unleashed, his black blade carving through white-armored assassins with terrifying precision. Dragon guards collided with temple warriors beneath exploding sparks of silver flame. Blood streaked across the stone floor. Seraphine backed away instinctively, and the wall behind her cracked open. Black fire spilled through the fracture. The entire corridor froze. The flames crawled across the stone like living shadows, silent and impossibly dark. Not smoke, not ordinary fire. Something deeper, older. The assassins recoiled instantly. Even Illyra's face lost color. "No," the priestess whispered. The black flames curled around Seraphine's feet. Varm, not burning. The mountain growled again beneath them. Then, every dragon outside the fortress roared at once. The sound shook the heavens. Temple warriors dropped to one knee in terror. Valor stared at Seraphine with naked disbelief. And somewhere far below the mountain, something ancient awakened. A single eye opened in darkness. Seraphine could feel it, watching her, recognizing her. The black flame surged higher. Then Kale arrived. Dragonfire exploded through the corridor in a crimson wave so powerful it shattered half the walls. Temple warriors were thrown backward violently, as the Dragon King stepped through smoke and ruin like death itself. His eyes blazed molten gold. Blood streaked one side of his face, and behind him unfurled the shadow of something inhuman, not fully visible, not entirely contained. Seraphine felt the air itself recoil around him. Kale's gaze locked instantly onto the black fire surrounding her. For the first time since she had known him, the Dragon King looked afraid. Not of her. For her. "Everyone out," he said quietly. No one moved. The temperature spiked violently. Kale's voice became monstrous. "I said out." The corridor erupted into panic. Temple warriors fled first. Guards dragged wounded soldiers away. Even Illyra retreated slowly, though her pale eyes remained fixed on Seraphine with growing horror. Only Valor hesitated. "My king, now." Valor obeyed. Within moments, only Kale and Seraphine remained inside the ruined corridor, while black flames crawled silently across the broken stone between them. Seraphine's pulse thundered painfully. "What is happening?" she whispered. Kyle did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the fire. Then slowly, carefully, he approached her. The flames reacted instantly. They rose higher around Seraphine's body like protective wings. Kyle stopped. Something dangerous moved beneath his composure. "You need to listen to me very carefully," he said. The mountain trembled again. Dust fell from the ceiling. Seraphine looked at the black fire surrounding her hands. "I didn't summon this." "I know." "Then why is it happening?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Because the mountain knows what you are." Fear hollowed her chest. "What am I?" His silence lasted too long. Then, a scream echoed from somewhere below the fortress. Not human. Ancien. Massive. The sound tore through Dravenhold like a nightmare reborn. Kyle's expression changed instantly. No. The floor cracked beneath them. Black fire erupted through the fractures. And far below the mountain, chains began breaking. Kyle seized Seraphine's wrist. "We have to move." Before she could protest, the corridor exploded. Stone collapsed around them as something enormous slammed against the foundations beneath Dravenhold. Kyle pulled Seraphine against him just before the ceiling crashed downward. For one violent heartbeat, she felt the full force of him. Not merely a king, not merely a man. A dragon barely contained inside human flesh. Heat engulfed them. Crimson fire burst from Kyle's body instinctively, shielding them from the collapse. Seraphine gasped as scales flashed briefly across his throat and hands before disappearing again beneath skin. The mountain roared. Kyle dragged her through falling debris toward an emergency passage hidden behind the shattered walls. "Hurry!" They descended into darkness together. The passage spiraled deep beneath the fortress, lit only by ancient fire crystals embedded in the stone. Above them, Dravenhold shook continuously as distant roars echoed through the mountain. "What escaped?" Seraphine asked breathlessly. Kyle's face remained grim. "Nothing should have." That is not an answer. His silence confirmed everything. They descended farther underground. The air grew hotter. Older. The walls changed too. Smooth carved stone gave way to raw black rock lined with ancient symbols Seraphine could not understand. Some glowed faintly as she passed. Others awakened completely. One by one, silver runes ignited along the tunnel walls. Not because of Kyle, because of her. The Dragon King noticed. So did Seraphine. Neither spoke. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Seraphine stopped breathing. An enormous lake of fire stretched beneath the mountain, molten gold and crimson churning endlessly beneath a ceiling lost in darkness. Massive chains hung over the abyss like the ribs of titans, and at the center of the chamber stood a gate, a colossal black gate covered in ancient seals. Several of those seals had shattered. Smoke poured through the cracks. KL released a curse under his breath. "What is this place?" Seraphine whispered. "The first dragon prison." Cold swept through her body. Kale stepped toward the gate carefully. "The kings of old buried monsters here. Creatures too dangerous to kill." Another scream echoed behind the gate. Closer this time. Seraphine felt the black flames stir around her again. Then she saw it. A symbol glowing faintly across the gate's surface. A silver hawk wrapped in black fire. The crest of Housevale. Her blood turned to ice. "No," she whispered. Kale looked sharply toward the symbol. For the first time since meeting him, Seraphine saw genuine shock break through his control. How was that possible? The black flames around her hands surged violently, and suddenly memories she had never lived flashed through her mind. A woman screaming beneath moonlight. A dragon, burning alive in chains. A child hidden beneath blood-stained banners. A voice whispering through darkness. "Protect the last daughter." Seraphine staggered. Kyle caught her instantly. The moment his skin touched hers, the gate exploded. Black fire erupted across the chamber. Ancient chains shattered violently, and something enormous began rising from the darkness below. The creature rose slowly from the abyss beneath the broken gate, and the mountain itself seemed to recoil from its presence. Molten fire churned violently below the hanging chains as an enormous shape emerged through smoke and darkness. First came the horns, curved backward like blackened crowns. Then the eyes opened vast, ancient, burning with silver fire instead of gold. Scales darker than midnight dragged against the shattered stone as the beast lifted itself upward from the prison pit. A dragon, but not like the others above Dravenhold. This one carried age like a curse. Entire sections of its body were scarred with old burns and broken chains fused into flesh. Ancient runes had been carved directly into its scales long ago, sealing magic beneath layers of black iron. One wing remained torn nearly in half, yet the sheer force of its presence made the underground chamber tremble. Seraphine could not breathe. The dragon's gaze locked onto her instantly. Not Kyle. Here. The black flames around her hands rose higher. Kyle moved in front of her immediately, crimson fire igniting across his arms as dragon scales surfaced beneath his skin. Stay behind me. But the creature did not attack. It stared at Seraphine with something far more terrifying than hunger. Recognition. Then, the dragon lowered its massive head. Kyle froze. No dragon bowed. Not willingly. Not even to kings. The chamber fell deathly silent, except for the crackling fire below. Seraphine's pulse hammered painfully as the beast spoke directly into her mind. At last, the blood returns. The voice was ancient enough to feel like stone grinding against stone. Seraphine stumbled backward. What are you? The dragon's silver eyes narrowed slightly. I guarded your bloodline before kingdoms existed. Kale's expression darkened instantly. That's impossible. The dragon ignored him completely. The mountain remembers your name, Little Hawk. Images flashed violently through Seraphine's mind again. A city burning beneath black fire. Dragons tearing each other apart in the sky. A woman carrying a newborn through smoke while soldiers died around her. And always the same symbol carved into walls, banners, armor. A silver hawk, engulfed in black flame. Seraphine pressed a trembling hand against her temple. Stop! The dragon lowered its head further. You carry her eyes. Kale stepped fully between them now, fire roaring brighter around him. Enough. The dragon's gaze finally shifted toward the king. The broken air. Something dangerous moved across Kale's face. You know me. I knew your father. The temperature in the chamber spiked, violently. Kael's fire flared with sudden fury. Do not speak of him. The dragon gave a slow, terrible blink, still carrying his rage, still chained by his shame. Seraphine felt the tension sharpen instantly. Whatever this creature truly was, it knew things buried deep enough to wound even the Dragon King. Kale's voice became lethal. Tell me why the mountain answered her. The dragon looked back toward Seraphine, because her blood carries the first flame. The words struck like thunder. Kale went completely still. Seraphine frowned weakly. I don't understand. The dragon's ancient voice filled the chamber once more. Long before dragon clans ruled these mountains, before crowns and temples and royal bloodlines, there was only fire. One flame divided into many. Gold flame for kings, crimson for war, white for prophecy, black for balance. The black flames around Seraphine twisted softly around her wrists, as if listening. The dragon continued. But men feared balance more than destruction, so they buried the black flame beneath lies and called it cursed. Kale's jaw hardened. The black pyre prophecy. Not prophecy, the dragon replied. Memory. Seraphine's stomach tightened painfully. You're saying my bloodline carried this power. Your bloodline protected it. The chamber shook again. Above them, distant bells rang throughout Dravenhold. Kale glanced upward sharply. The council knows something escaped. The dragon's silver eyes narrowed. They will come, and if they do, then they will repeat the first betrayal. Seraphine looked between them, heart racing. What betrayal? Neither answered immediately. That silence frightened her most. Finally, Kale spoke. Thousands of years ago, the dragon clans nearly destroyed each other in civil war. His voice remained cold, controlled. One bloodline carried black flame capable of binding rival clans together through shared fire. His gaze darkened. The royal families feared losing power. Realization spread slowly through Seraphine. They slaughtered them. The dragon's growl shook the chamber. Not all. Kale looked at her carefully. A few children escaped. The silver hawk crest. Her mother's hidden records. The missing bloodline. Seraphine's knees weakened slightly. My family knew? Yes, Kale said quietly. Which means House Vale did not fall during the war because your father delayed surrender. His expression darkened further. The council targeted your bloodline deliberately. The truth hit harder than any blade. Her entire life had been built on a lie. Her house had not been punished for betrayal. It had been erased because the kingdom feared what slept in their blood. Seraphine looked at the black flames around her hands with rising horror. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because your family protected you, Kale said. And because revealing black flame openly would have started another war. The dragon's voice rumbled low through the chamber. The war has already begun. At that exact moment, horns sounded above the mountain. Kyle cursed sharply. They found the lower passages. The Dragon King turned towards Seraphine fast enough to make the fire whip around him. You need to leave Dravenhold tonight. What? The council will never stop now. You knew about this prophecy. I knew fragments. Frustration cracked through his voice. Not this. The dragon watched them both silently. Seraphine stared at Kale. And what exactly were you planning to do with me if the prophecy proved true? Something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. I haven't decided. The honesty hurt more than lies would have. Before she could answer, footsteps thundered through the tunnels beyond the chamber. Soldiers. Dozens. Silver fire illuminated the passage entrance. The council had come armed for execution. Kale's expression became instantly ruthless again. Stay behind me. Temple warriors flooded into the chamber first, white armor glowing beneath moonfire enchantments. Behind them came dragon soldiers loyal to the council. And finally, the High Chancellor himself, surrounded by elder clan lords. The moment they saw the ancient dragon standing free beside Seraphine, chaos erupted. By the gods. The prison beast. It bowed to her. The Chancellor's face turned deathly pale. Then, hard. Kill it, he ordered immediately. Nobody moved. Even armed soldiers hesitated before the massive dragon. The creature's silver eyes swept across the chamber with ancient contempt. Cowards wearing crowns. Kale stepped forward before anyone else could act. No one attacks. The Chancellor stared at him in disbelief. Your Majesty, that creature nearly destroyed the Eastern clans during the First War, and yet it still shows more restraint than this council. Murmurs exploded behind the older man. The Chancellor pointed directly at Seraphine. Look at her. Every eye turned toward the black flames, still moving around her body. Fear spread visibly through the soldiers. The Chancellor's voice rang through the chamber. The prophecy is true. Black flame has returned through the royal line itself. Seraphine felt panic, rising everywhere around her. Some soldiers backed away. Others gripped weapons harder. Temple priestesses began whispering prayers. The dragon beside her growled softly. Then, Illyra entered the chamber. The high priestess moved through the soldiers slowly, silver robes untouched by ash despite the chaos around them. Her pale eyes settled first on the freed dragon, then on Seraphine, and finally on Kyle. For the first time since meeting her, Seraphine saw genuine sorrow in the priestess's expression. It should never have reached this point, Illyra said quietly. Kale's voice turned icy. You sent assassins after my wife. I tried to save the kingdom. You tried to murder a queen in her bed. Illyra ignored the fury beneath his words. The black flame cannot rule again. The ancient dragon laughed then. A terrible sound. Rule? Little priestess, your kingdoms are dust compared to what once existed. Silver fire ignited around Illyra's hands. We sealed your kind for a reason. You sealed truth, because you feared losing power. The chamber tension snapped tighter. Kael moved subtly closer to Seraphine. Not enough for comfort. Enough for protection. The gesture did not go unnoticed. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed instantly. Then, carefully, dangerously, he spoke the words designed to wound deepest. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "your father made the same mistake." The chamber went silent. Kael's fire exploded. Crimson flames tore across the stone floor as dragon scales surfaced visibly across his throat and arms. His pupils narrowed into slits. Every soldier stepped backward instinctively. The Chancellor continued anyway. He chose forbidden blood over the clans. The older man's voice hardened. And because of that weakness, the kingdom bled. Seraphine looked sharply toward Kael. Weakness. Merze. Forbidden blood. Pieces were beginning to connect. Kael's father had loved someone the kingdom feared, and it had destroyed him. The Dragon King's voice dropped into something barely human. "You know nothing about my father. I know. He nearly shattered this throne for a woman carrying cursed fire." Seraphine's breath caught. Kael's mother. The chained dragon. The kingdom's hatred of mercy. Understanding crashed into her all at once. Kael's mother had carried black flame. The council had killed her for it. That was why the old dragon came to Seraphine. That was why Kael feared prophecy. And that was why his kingdom no longer trusted his bloodline. Because the Dragon King himself carried forbidden blood, hidden beneath royal fire. The Chancellor saw realization cross Seraphine's face, and smiled. "There," he said quietly. "Now you understand the truth of the throne you married into." Kael moved instantly, not toward Seraphine, toward the Chancellor. The chamber erupted as dragon fire exploded violently outward. Soldiers screamed and scattered. Temple shields ignited under the force of Kael's rage. But before he could reach the Chancellor, Illyra raised both hands. Silver moonfire slammed downward between them. The impact shattered stone. Ancient runes across the chamber awakened all at once, and the black flames surrounding Seraphine answered. The entire underground prison exploded in light. Black fire surged upward like a living storm, swallowing silver moonfire whole. Everyone froze. The flames twisted around Seraphine's body in enormous spiraling wings. Not harming her, claiming her. The mountain roared louder than ever before. Then every dragon above Dravenhold dropped from the sky simultaneously. Thousands of wings, thousands of roars, all bowing toward the mountain beneath their queen. The entire mountain bowed, not metaphorically, not symbolically. Every dragon circling Dravenhold descended toward the fortress in a deafening storm of wings and fire. Their roars shook the towers. Soldiers above screamed as colossal beasts landed across battlements and rooftops, lowering their heads toward the mountain prison below, toward Seraphine. Inside the underground chamber, silence became terror. The black flames towering around Seraphine moved like living shadows shaped into wings, stretching nearly to the cavern ceiling. Ancient runes ignited across the stone floor beneath her feet, in circles of silver and obsidian. No one dared move. The High Chancellor looked horrified. Temple warriors stared at her, as though witnessing the return of a dead god. And Kael looked at her like a man watching history bleed open in front of him. Seraphine herself could barely breathe. The flames did not hurt, but they felt enormous. Ancien, as if countless voices slept inside them. The chained dragon beside her lowered its massive body fully against the ground. "My queen," it said softly within her mind. "No," Seraphine whispered weakly. "I'm not." The dragon's silver eyes closed briefly. "You carry the last living fire of the first bloodline." The Chancellor finally found his voice. "Kill her," he shouted. Panic shattered the chamber. Temple warriors rushed forward with silver spears raised high. Kael moved first. Dragon fire erupted from his body in a violent crimson wave, powerful enough to hurl soldiers backward across the stone floor. Several temple shields shattered instantly beneath the heat. "No one touches her," the Dragon King roared. The mountain answered him. A massive explosion shook the chamber as dragons above the fortress slammed onto the outer walls. Stone cracked. Dust rained from the ceiling. Chaos erupted everywhere. Some soldiers obeyed the chancellor. Others obeyed the king. Steel clashed against steel beneath screaming firelight. Illyra stood frozen near the chamber entrance, pale eyes fixed on Seraphine with dawning horror. The prophecy, the priestess whispered. It wasn't about destruction. The chained dragon laughed softly. Too late, little moonkeeper. A temple warrior lunged toward Seraphine through the chaos. Instinct moved before thought. The black flame surged outward. The soldier's silver spear melted instantly into ash. Not the man. Only the weapon. The warrior stumbled backward in terror, unharmed but shaking violently. Seraphine stared at her own hands in shock. The fire had chosen restraint. The ancient dragon's voice echoed through her mind. Black flame does not destroy blindly. It reveals truth. Another soldier charged her from behind. Kael intercepted him brutally. The Dragon King's claws, actual claws now partially surfaced from scaled hands, slammed the warrior into a stone pillar, hard enough to crack marble. Crimson fire roared around Kael's body as his control frayed visibly beneath fury. Seraphine saw it clearly now. The monster his kingdom feared. Not because he lacked mercy, because he carried too much rage to survive mercy safely. Kael, she shouted. He turned instantly at her voice, and for one dangerous heartbeat, his dragon nearly surfaced completely. Golden eyes narrowed into slits. Black scales spread across half his throat. Smoke curled from his mouth with every breath. Yet the moment he truly saw her, the monster stopped. Not vanished. Stopped. The realization struck Seraphine harder than the chaos surrounding them. He was holding himself together for her. The chancellor saw it too, and suddenly, his expression changed. Not fear. Opportunity. The old man stepped backward slowly through the fighting soldiers. Then he shouted the one thing capable of breaking the entire kingdom apart. The king carries forbidden blood himself. Everything stopped, even the battle. Silence crashed through the chamber like a blade. Kael's face became deathly still. The chancellor pointed toward him with trembling fury. His mother carried black flame. The royal line has been corrupted for decades. Shock exploded through the soldiers. Temple warriors recoiled from Kael instinctively. Several dragon lords looked physically sick. The Dragon King stood motionless at the center of the chamber, while his deepest secret bled openly before the kingdom. Seraphine felt his pain instantly, not because of magic, because she finally understood him. All this time, Kael had ruled a kingdom already searching for reasons to reject him. Every act of mercy had looked suspicious. Every hesitation had looked weak. Every political failure had become proof that his bloodline was dangerous. He had spent years ruling beside people waiting for him to become his father. Or, worse, his mother. The chancellor's voice echoed triumphantly. Look at him. Look at what sits upon the ashen throne. The soldiers stared at Kael, with open fear now. Not loyalty. Not devotion. Fear. And for the first time since she had met him, Seraphine saw something crack behind the Dragon King's eyes. Not rage. Loneliness. Terrible, endless loneliness. The kind born only when an entire kingdom fears what you are. Illyra stepped forward slowly. Your Majesty, Kael laughed once. A hollow sound. So now you finally understand, he said quietly. Crimson fire curled violently around him. My father didn't die because he was weak. His voice darkened. He died because he loved someone your kingdom feared more than war itself. The chancellor lifted his chin. He endangered the clans. No. Kael's eyes became monstrous. You murdered my mother. The chamber recoiled. Even Seraphine froze. The Dragon King's voice dropped lower. You burned her beneath moonfire judgment, while my father begged for mercy. Crimson flames exploded higher around him. Then you told the kingdom she died from corruption. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Kael had never spoken this truth aloud before. Seraphine could feel it. Years of grief and hatred lived beneath those words. The Chancellor's face hardened coldly. She carried black flame. She carried peace. She carried ruin. No, Kale thundered. You created ruin. The mountain shook violently again. Above them, dragons roared across the fortress. The ancient chained dragon rose partially beside Seraphine, silver eyes blazing. At last the hatchling remembers his fire. Kale ignored the creature completely. His gaze remained locked on the Chancellor, with murder buried inside it. But before he could move, Seraphine stepped between them. The entire chamber froze again. Even Kale stared at her in disbelief. She looked up at him carefully, and saw something no one else in this kingdom had likely seen for years. Not the Dragon King, not the Conqueror. A wounded son still bleeding beneath the crown. Don't, she whispered. Crimson fire flickered violently around him. They killed her, he said hoarsely. I know. They'll never stop. I know. Pain twisted across his face. The monster beneath his skin wanted blood. She could feel it. But Seraphine also understood something else now. If Kyle slaughtered the council here, the prophecy would become real. The kingdom would never see justice. Only destruction, and Kale would become exactly what they feared. She stepped closer carefully, despite the dangerous heat surrounding him. You told me once, she said softly, that dragons admire courage only when it does not become foolishness. His eyes locked onto hers. Then be brave enough not to become their monster. The words struck him visibly. Crimson fire faltered around his body. The Chancellor shouted instantly, sensing weakness. Seize them both. Soldiers hesitated. No one truly wanted to move first anymore. Then, one young temple warrior raised his spear towards Seraphine with shaking hands, and the black flames reacted violently. The fire surged upward in enormous wings. The chamber exploded into darkness. Every torch died simultaneously. Every flame turned black. A terrible ancient pressure filled the room. Then, a voice echoed through the chamber. Not Seraphine's, not the dragon's. Something older. The first blood kneels to no throne. The soldiers collapsed instantly. Many dropped their weapons outright. Others fell to their knees in terror. The black flames parted slowly around Seraphine's body, and behind her, a spirit appeared. A woman formed entirely from shadow and silver fire. Long dark hair flowed around armor, marked with the silver hawk crest. Ancient scars crossed her face. Her eyes burned black and gold simultaneously. Kale went utterly still. The Chancellor stumbled backward in horror. No. The spirit looked directly at Seraphine. Daughter of my blood. Tears burned suddenly behind Seraphine's eyes, though she did not understand why. Who are you? The spirit's expression softened with unbearable sadness. The last queen they tried to erase. The chamber shook again. The ancient dragon lowered its head deeply. The first flame queen has returned. Panic spread instantly through the council ranks. Some fled. Others began praying. Elira stared at the spirit in disbelief. The histories said, "You died." The spirit looked toward her calmly. "Your histories were written by frightened men." The Chancellor suddenly screamed, "Kill the vessel!" A hidden temple archer fired from the rear of the chamber. The silver arrow flew straight toward Seraphine's heart. Kale moved instantly. Too late. The arrow struck, and black fire caught it in midair. The entire chamber stared. The arrow melted slowly into silver ash inches from Seraphine's chest. Then the Spirit Queen turned toward the Chancellor, and for the first time, her expression became wrathful. You taught generations to fear balance, because balance threatened your power. The Chancellor backed away trembling. You were supposed to stay buried. No, the spirit replied softly. We were supposed to be remembered. The black flames exploded outward across the chamber walls. Ancient hidden murals awakened beneath centuries of stone and ash. Images appeared everywhere. The true history. Dragon clans, kneeling beside black flame rulers. Humans and dragons standing together. Not conquerors. Not slaves. Equals. The entire kingdom had been built on a lie. And now every witness in the chamber was seeing the truth. No one spoke. The awakened murals stretched across the underground chamber in rivers of silver and black fire, illuminating truths buried for centuries beneath Dravenhold. Ancient kings stood beside black flame queens, not as rulers over subjects, but as guardians beside guardians. Dragons knelt willingly beside humans. Clans once united beneath a single crest. The silver hawk wrapped in black flame. Not cursed. Sacred. Temple warriors stared upward in disbelief. Some dropped to their knees entirely. Others looked physically ill, as though the foundation of their lives had cracked open beneath them. The High Chancellor backed slowly away from the murals, horror hollowing his face. "No," he whispered again. "These records were destroyed." The Spirit Queen turned toward him calmly. "You destroyed copies." The old man's breathing became ragged. Illyra stepped closer to the glowing wall, trembling fingers brushing ancient carvings. "The first flame was never a weapon," she whispered. The spirit's eyes softened slightly. "No, it was a bond." Seraphine could feel the truth vibrating through the chamber itself. The black flames around her no longer felt monstrous. They felt mournful, like something abandoned too long in darkness. Then Kale spoke, quietly, painfully. "My mother knew this." Everyone looked toward him. The Dragon King stood motionless beneath the firelight, his expression carved from grief and fury. Crimson flames still moved faintly beneath his skin, but no longer wildly. Controlled. Barely. "She tried to tell the council," he continued, "before they executed her." The word execution shattered what little composure remained among the soldiers, because until now, many had probably believed the official story. Corruption. Madness. Necessary sacrifice. Not murder. Illyra looked toward Kale slowly, genuine horror spreading across her face. "Your father begged the temple to spare her," she whispered. Kyle laughed bitterly. He offered them his crown. Silence crashed down again. Seraphine felt her chest tighten painfully. The Dragon King's father had offered the throne for the woman he loved, and the kingdom had killed her anyway. Suddenly, Kael's loneliness made terrible sense. Why trust mercy when mercy had failed his family? Why trust love when love had destroyed his father? The Chancellor recovered first. Fear twisted quickly into desperation. "These lies change nothing," he snapped sharply. "Black flame still threatens the kingdom." The Spirit Queen turned slowly toward him, still afraid after all this time. "You corrupted the prophecy," the Chancellor shouted. "The black pyre brings ruin." "No," the Spirit replied. "Fear of unity brings ruin." The old man's face darkened with fanatic certainty. Dragon clans were meant to rule. The ancient dragon near Seraphine rumbled low. "And there it is. The truth. Not fear of destruction. Fear of equality." The Chancellor pointed toward Seraphine violently. "If she lives, every rival clan will rise for her bloodline." "Perhaps," Kyle said coldly. The Chancellor froze. The Dragon King stepped forward slowly. "But after tonight," Kale continued, "they will rise against you first." Panic flickered across the counselors immediately, because now the danger had changed. This was no longer merely prophecy. This was political collapse. If the truth spread beyond Dravenhold, the legitimacy of the Royal Council itself could shatter. The Chancellor realized it too, and suddenly, his fear became deadly. He moved fast, far faster than an old man should have. A hidden dagger flashed from his sleeve straight toward Seraphine, but KL intercepted it barehanded. The blade pierced directly through his palm. Seraphine gasped. Crimson fire exploded instantly from the wound. The Chancellor staggered backward triumphantly. "Moonsilver," he hissed. KL's expression darkened sharply. Moonsilver. Poison against dragon blood. The crimson flames around his body flickered violently. Several soldiers moved immediately toward the Chancellor in confusion. "What have you done?" The old man ignored them. His eyes remained fixed on Kale, with desperate hatred. "You should never have inherited this throne." Kyle ripped the blade from his hand slowly. Blood hit the stone floor in burning drops. But the blood wasn't entirely red anymore. Black veins spread rapidly beneath the skin around the wound. Seraphine's stomach dropped. The poison was reacting to the forbidden blood inside him. The Chancellor smiled grimly. Let them see what you truly are. Kael swayed once. Only once. But the entire chamber felt the shift in control. The monster beneath his skin stirred violently. Seraphine moved toward him instantly. Kael, stay back. His voice no longer sounded entirely human. Smoke curled from between his teeth. Scales spread visibly across one side of his face. Temple warriors raised weapons nervously. The Chancellor lifted his voice triumphantly. Behold, your king. Crimson fire exploded upward around Kael's body. The mountain shook hard enough to crack the chamber floor. And then, Kael screamed. Not in pain. Transformation. The sound tore through the chamber like a dragon's roar trapped inside human flesh. Soldiers fled instantly. Some fell to their knees in terror. The ancient dragon near Seraphine growled softly. The poison shattered his control. Seraphine stared in horror as Kael's body began changing. Black scales surfaced rapidly across his throat and arms. Claws tore through his fingertips. Golden fire burned from his eyes bright enough to illuminate the entire chamber. But worst of all, his dragon form was wrong. Fragments of black flame moved beneath the crimson fire. Forbidden blood. Hidden all these years beneath the royal line. Kael staggered backward violently, fighting himself. Leave, he snarled through gritted teeth. Now, the Chancellor stepped backward, smiling. Yes, this was what he wanted. The court witnessing the Dragon King become exactly what they feared. Seraphine saw it instantly. The poison wasn't meant to kill Kael. It was meant to expose him publicly. The Spirit Queen looked toward Seraphine urgently. If he loses himself here, the prophecy changes. Fear slammed through Seraphine's chest. What do I do? The spirit's eyes burned brighter. Remind him he is loved. The answer struck her harder than any prophecy, because suddenly she understood the terrible truth beneath all of this. Kael had never truly feared black flame. He feared becoming unloved because of it, just like his mother. The Dragon King roared again as more scales spread across his body. Temple soldiers scattered from the chamber entrance entirely now. Only Seraphine moved closer. Seraphine! Valor shouted from across the room. Don't! She ignored him. Kael's claws slammed into the stone floor hard enough to shatter it. Stay away from me. But she kept walking. Every instinct screamed this was madness. One wrong movement, and he could kill her accidentally. Yet, beneath the monstrous fury in his eyes, she saw something else. Terror. Not of hurting himself, of hurting her. Seraphine stopped directly before him. The heat nearly overwhelmed her instantly. Kael towered over her now, half transformed into something ancient and lethal. Crimson and black fire twisted violently around him. I said run, he growled. Seraphine reached for him anyway. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even the ancient dragon looked startled. Kael recoiled sharply as her hand touched his face. Not because it burned him, because it didn't. The transformation faltered instantly. His golden eyes widened. You, he whispered hoarsely. Seraphine pressed her forehead carefully against his despite the scales. I'm still here. The chamber went silent again. The black flames surrounding Seraphine moved gently around them both now, weaving through Kael's crimson fire without conflict. Balance. The Spirit Queen watched with tears in her ancient eyes. The first bond returns. Kael's breathing shook violently. No one should touch me, he whispered. Pain cracked through those words. Years of isolation buried beneath them. Seraphine looked at him carefully. Then your kingdom was wrong. The black veins beneath his skin stopped spreading. Slowly, painfully, Kael's monstrous form began retreating inch by inch beneath her touch. The Chancellor stared in horror. No. Seraphine turned toward him at last, and for the first time since entering Dravenhold, she looked like a queen, not because of power, because she had stopped being afraid of their fear. The black flames behind her rose into enormous wings again. The murals across the chamber blazed brighter. The Spirit Queen stood at Seraphine's back like living memory, and every dragon above the mountain roared in answer. The Chancellor stumbled backward. "You don't understand what will happen if the clans learn the truth." "No," Seraphine said quietly. "You don't." The old man's face twisted. Then desperation overtook reason completely. He drew a second hidden blade, not toward Seraphine, toward himself. Illyra's eyes widened instantly. "Stop." Too late. The Chancellor drove the dagger directly into the chamber's central rune circle. Moonsilver shattered across ancient symbols. The entire mountain screamed. The runes exploded violently beneath everyone's feet. The ancient dragon roared. Kael grabbed Seraphine instantly, and deep beneath Dravenhold, something far older than prophecy awakened. The prison below the mountain split open. The mountain broke. A deafening crack tore through the underground chamber as the prison beneath Dravenhold split open from its foundation upward. Ancient runes shattered in bursts of silver light. Entire sections of stone collapsed into the abyss below while molten fire erupted through widening fractures. Soldiers screamed. Temple warriors fled toward the tunnels. Above them, dragons roared in panic across the fortress skies. Kael wrapped one arm around Seraphine just before the floor beneath them gave way. They fell together. Heat swallowed everything. Stone exploded around them as they plunged through collapsing darkness toward the deeper levels beneath the mountain prison. Seraphine felt Kael pull her tightly against his chest while crimson fire surrounded their bodies like a shield. The impact never came. Ving's did. Massive. Violent. Kael's dragon form burst partially free mid-fall. Black and crimson wings tore through the darkness, slamming outward hard enough to stop their descent just above a lake of molten fire far below. Seraphine gasped as scorching wind whipped around them. For one breathtaking moment, she saw him completely. Not fully dragon, not fully human. Something between. Something ancient and terrifying and unbearably beautiful. Black scales covered most of his body now beneath rivers of crimson fire. Horns curved backward through dark hair. His golden eyes burned brighter than the molten lake below. And yet, he still held her carefully. Even like this, Kael landed heavily on a narrow ledge deep beneath the prison chamber. Stone trembled beneath his claws. Smoke curled from his body with every ragged breath. Far above them, the sounds of battle echoed faintly through the collapsing mountain. Seraphine slowly lifted her eyes and realized where they had fallen. An ancient city slept beneath Dravenhold. Ruins stretched endlessly through the cavern darkness below the mountain. Broken towers rose from black volcanic stone. Massive statues of dragons and humans stood side by side, cracked by time but unmistakable in meaning. Not conquerors, equals. Silver rivers of old magic glowed faintly through the ruined streets. The lost kingdom of the first flame. Seraphine stared in stunned silence. Kael remained motionless beside her, breathing heavily as his dragon form struggled against control. "You need to stay back," he rasped. But his voice sounded weaker now, not more dangerous. Seraphine turned toward him carefully. The moon-silver poison still spread beneath his scales in black veins. "You're hurt. I'll survive." "You don't know that." Kael laughed bitterly, smoke escaping his mouth. "I survived worse after my mother died." The pain in his voice hollowed her chest. Before she could answer, a low rumble echoed across the ruins below. Not the mountain. Something moving. Kael instantly stepped in front of Seraphine again despite his weakened state. Then dozens of golden eyes opened throughout the darkness. Seraphine's pulse stopped. Dragons. Not one. An entire hidden brood. Ancient dragons emerged slowly from the ruined city beneath the mountain, enormous bodies moving through shadows and molten mist. Some carried scars older than kingdoms. Others bore blackened chains hanging broken from their scales. Prisoners. The forgotten dragons of the first flame. Kael's claws flexed protectively. "They survived," he whispered. The dragons surrounded the ledge silently, watching, judging. One colossal white dragon stepped forward slowly, larger than any Seraphine had ever seen. Blind scars crossed both its eyes, yet it moved with eerie certainty. Then the beast lowered itself before Seraphine. Not Gael. Here. The rest of the dragons followed instantly, an entire hidden legion bowing together. Seraphine's breath caught painfully. The white dragon spoke directly into her mind. The bloodline returns at last. Kale stared at the dragons in disbelief. Why are they bowing to her? The white dragon turned its scarred face toward him. Because they remember what your kingdom forgot. The ruins around them began glowing brighter. Ancient runes awakened across broken walls and shattered towers. Then footsteps echoed through the city. The spirit queen emerged from silver fire between the ruins, her expression grave. "The prison is broken," she said. Seraphine looked toward her urgently. What did the chancellor do? The spirit queen's gaze darkened. He awakened the hollow flame. Cold spread instantly through the cavern. Even the dragons growled uneasily. Kale's expression hardened. That creature still exists? The spirit nodded once. The first corruption born from dragon greed. Seraphine frowned weakly. I don't understand. The spirit queen moved closer. When the first flame united humans and dragons, not all accepted peace. Some dragon kings desired power, untouched by balance. Ancient sorrow moved through her voice. They tried to consume the black flame instead of share it. Images flashed through Seraphine's mind again. Dragons devouring living fire. Kings burning from inside. Entire cities consumed by shadow. The corruption became alive. The spirit continued softly. A flame that feeds on hatred and fear. Kale cursed quietly. The hollow flame was buried beneath the mountain after the first war. The white dragon's growl shook the ruins. And now the seals are broken. Far above them. Another violent tremor shook Dravenhold. Screams echoed faintly through the mountain. Seraphine's stomach tightened. The fortress. Kale's face darkened grimly. If the hollow flame reaches the surface, every dragon on the mountain will lose control. Fear swept through the ruins instantly. The hidden dragons shifted uneasily. The spirit queen looked toward Seraphine. Only balanced flame can stop corruption. Seraphine stared at the black fire still moving around her hands. You mean me? You and him, the spirit corrected gently. Kale stiffened immediately. No. The spirit met his gaze calmly. You know the old law. Kale's expression became furious. I won't bind her to this. Seraphine looked between them. What law? Neither answered immediately. That silence again. Always silence around the things that mattered most. Finally, the white dragon spoke. The first flame was never wielded by one soul alone. Understanding spread slowly through Seraphine. Abont. The spirit queen nodded. Black flame and royal fire together. Kael stepped away sharply. No. The spirit's expression softened with old grief. You fear becoming your father. The words hit him visibly. Kale turned away toward the burning ruins below. My father trusted love over survival. And your kingdom murdered him for it. Crimson fire flared violently around him again. Seraphine moved toward him carefully. Kael. I said no. Pain cracked beneath the fury now. Not anger toward her. Fear. The Dragon King looked back at her. Golden eyes burning with exhaustion and old wounds. You don't understand what this bond means. Then, explain it. His jaw tightened. It links souls. The words echoed softly through the ruined city. Kale's voice lowered. If one falls into corruption, the other burns with them. Seraphine's chest tightened. And your father? He died trying to save my mother after the kingdom condemned her. The truth settled heavily between them. Kael wasn't refusing because he didn't care. He was refusing because he did. Too much. The Spirit Queen approached slowly. The hollow flame rises, child. Soon dragons above the mountain will begin turning on one another. Fear will spread faster than fire. Another roar echoed from somewhere above. This one sounded wrong. Distorted. Corrupted. Kael's expression darkened instantly. It started. Suddenly one of the hidden dragons screamed through the ruins. Everyone turned sharply. Black fire erupted from the dragon's mouth, not Seraphine's controlled flame, but twisted shadow fire writhing with corruption. The beast convulsed violently, golden eyes darkening into pitch black. The hollow flame had reached them already. The infected dragon lunged wildly toward the others. Chaos exploded across the ruined city. Dragons roared and scattered as corrupted fire spread across ancient stone. The infected beast slammed through broken pillars with terrifying strength. Kale transformed fully. Crimson and black fire exploded around him as his dragon form burst free completely at last. Massive wings unfolded through the cavern darkness. Horns curved backward above molten gold eyes. He launched himself directly at the corrupted dragon. The impact shook the ruins. 2 colossal dragons crashed through ancient towers in a storm of claws and fire. Seraphine watched in horror as the corruption spread rapidly across the infected beast's scales like living darkness. "It's consuming him," she whispered. The Spirit Queen looked toward her urgently. Because hatred always consumes faster than balance. Kale roared as he slammed the corrupted dragon against shattered stone. But every wound he inflicted only released more black corruption into the air. The infected beast bit into Kale's shoulder. Crimson blood exploded across the ruins. Seraphine moved instinctively. The black flames around her surged violently. Then something impossible happened. The corruption hesitated. Every shadow flame in the ruins paused briefly at her presence. The Spirit Queen's eyes widened. "It remembers you." Seraphine didn't understand, but she stepped forward anyway. "Stop!" she shouted. The black flames erupted outward from her body. Not attacking, calling. The corrupted dragon froze mid-strike against Kale. Its blackened eyes locked onto Seraphine. Pain lived inside them. Not evil. Awaken. The creature screamed, and Seraphine suddenly understood the terrible truth. The hollow flame wasn't merely corruption. It was suffering twisted into hunger. The dragon collapsed violently across the ruins, convulsing beneath shadow fire. Kyle shifted back partially into human form nearby, blood pouring from his shoulder. "Seraphine, get back." But she ignored him, because the dragon was crying. Actually crying. Black fire leaked from its mouth like poisoned grief. Without fully understanding why, Seraphine approached slowly. The white dragon behind her rumbled nervously. "Little Queen." The corrupted beast trembled before her. Then Seraphine placed her hand against its burning scales. Kale moved instantly. "No, too late." Black fire exploded around them both, and suddenly Seraphine saw everything. The hollow flame. Its birth. Its pain. A dragon king consumed by terror of losing power. A fire forced to devour itself endlessly. Loneliness. Endless loneliness. Tears filled Seraphine's eyes. "This isn't evil," she whispered brokenly. "It's broken." The corrupted dragon collapsed fully beneath her hand, and for one impossible moment, the black corruption retreated. The ruins fell silent. Even the dragon stopped moving. Seraphine knelt beside the collapsed beast, while black corruption receded slowly beneath her hand like a tide being pulled backward by moonlight. The dragon trembled violently, enormous body shuddering against the ancient stone streets. Its golden eyes returned. Not fully, but enough. The creature looked at Seraphine with exhausted disbelief. Kale stared from several yards away, blood dripping steadily from the wound in his shoulder. "She purified it," one of the hidden dragons whispered through the mind link. The white dragon lowered its scarred head slowly. Not purified, balanced. The Spirit Queen's gaze remained fixed on Seraphine with something almost like hope. At last, Seraphine barely heard them, because the moment she touched the corruption, she had felt it. Not darkness, not evil. Pain abandoned for so long it had become monstrous. The hollow flame fed on fear, because fear was all it remembered. The realization shattered something inside her. How many wars had begun that same way? How many kingdoms? How many people? The dragon beneath her gave a weak rumble and slowly lowered its head against the stone at her feet. Submission. Trust. Kale approached carefully now, still breathing hard from the battle. "You should be dead," he said hoarsely. Seraphine looked up at him. I know, but she wasn't. The black flames around her moved softly, no longer violent. They curled around Kael's wounded arm instinctively, sealing some of the bleeding. He stiffened immediately. The flames did not burn him either. For one suspended moment, neither moved. The ruined city glowed faintly around them, while hidden dragons watched in silence. And Kael realized what the others already had. The black flame accepted him, not despite his forbidden blood. Because of it, fear flickered across his face again. Not fear of Seraphine, fear of hope. The Spirit Queen stepped closer. The bond has already begun. Kael's jaw hardened instantly. No, the spirit looked at him with ancient sadness. You cannot stop it now. I can. But even Seraphine could hear the lie beneath his voice. The white dragon spoke next. The hollow flame awakens fully. If balance is not restored before dawn, the corruption will spread through every dragon on the mountain. Another roar echoed above them. This one sounded worse. More beasts turning. Kael closed his eyes briefly. Then, another tremor shook the ruins. Stone cracked across several ancient towers. The Spirit Queen turned sharply toward the darkness beneath the city. Its source rise. Seraphine frowned. The source? The spirit's expression darkened. The first king who consumed the hollow flame still lives. Cold spread instantly through the ruined city. Even the dragons recoiled. Kael cursed quietly. I thought he was sealed beneath the abyss. He was, the spirit replied softly. Until the Chancellor shattered the prison. A deep sound rolled upward through the caverns then. Notaruar. Laughter. Ancien. Broken. Every dragon in the ruins went still. The sound came again, echoing from somewhere far below the city. The Hollow King had awakened. Seraphine felt fear grip her throat. Not ordinary fear. Something primal. As if the mountain itself remembered this creature and wished it had remained buried forever. Kael stepped beside her instinctively. We leave. Now. The white dragon blocked the path immediately. You cannot flee this. Kael's eyes narrowed dangerously. Watch me. If the Hollow King reaches the surface, every dragon carrying rage or grief will become his vessel. Silence followed, because that meant almost all of them. The Spirit Queen looked toward Kael carefully. Especially you. The words struck him visibly. Kael carried too much fury, too much pain. The hollow flame would devour him faster than most. Seraphine understood it instantly, and judging by the fear in his eyes, so did he. Another distant laugh echoed through the caverns. Closer now. The ruined city lights flickered. Black corruption began crawling slowly through the streets below like spreading veins. The Hollow King was rising. Kael turned sharply towards Seraphine. You need to leave this mountain immediately. No, this isn't a request. You think I'll abandon everyone now? I think I'd rather lose my throne than watch that thing consume you. The rawness beneath the words stunned her silent. Kael realized what he had admitted the moment he said it. His expression closed instantly. Too late. Seraphine stepped closer. You're afraid for me. I'm afraid of what happens if you die. The answer sounded cold, strategic, but his eyes betrayed him completely. The Spirit Queen smiled faintly through old sorrow. At last, the dragon heir learns honesty. Kael ignored her, or tried to. Another tremor interrupted them. Then screaming erupted from the upper tunnels. Human screams. The hidden dragons snarled as soldiers stumbled into the ruined city below. Dravenhold survivors, temple warriors, burned servants, wounded dragon riders. They flooded through the lower passages in panic, while corrupted fire spread behind them. Several dragons above the city had already turned. Seraphine saw the terror instantly in the survivors' eyes. Not only fear of corruption, fear of her. Some immediately backed away at the sight of the black flames surrounding her. Others dropped to their knees. One wounded servant whispered shakily, "The Black Queen." The title rippled through the crowd. Kael stepped forward instantly. "She is under my protection." A temple warrior laughed, bitterly despite blood pouring down his face. Protection? His eyes darted toward Seraphine fearfully. Your Majesty, the fortress is collapsing because of her. No, Kale said coldly. Because of lies. The wounded soldier recoiled. Others murmured uncertainly. Then the high priestess Illyra emerged from the crowd. Alive, ash-covered, bleeding from one temple. Her pale eyes found Seraphine first. Then Kaya. The upper fortress is lost, she said quietly. Half the dragons have become corrupted already. The white dragon growled low. Too fast. Illyra looked toward Seraphine slowly. Can she stop it? The question silenced everyone. All eyes turned toward Seraphine. The weight of it nearly crushed her. She wasn't a queen, wasn't a savior. Hours ago, she had barely understood her own blood. Now entire lives balanced on her answer. I don't know, she admitted softly. Some faces hardened instantly at her uncertainty. Fear again. Always fear. Illyra studied her carefully. But you calmed one. Seraphine nodded weakly. I felt its pain. The high priestess went still. Then she whispered something almost inaudible. The old records were true. Kale frowned sharply. What records? Illyra looked at him with visible guilt. The first flame queens could hear suffering inside corrupted fire. The spirit queen's expression darkened. And yet your temple buried that truth. Illyra lowered her head slowly. Yes, for the first time, Seraphine saw the crushing weight the priestess carried. Not hatred. Regret. The woman had spent her life defending lies she genuinely believed protected the kingdom. Now the truth stood burning before her. A wounded dragon rider staggered forward suddenly. The Hollow King is coming. The cavern darkened instantly. Another laugh echoed upward through the ruins. Closer. Then black fire erupted from the streets below. Buildings collapsed as something enormous moved through the ancient city beneath them. Dragons roared in panic. Survivors scattered backward. And slowly, a colossal figure emerged from the darkness. Not fully dragon, not fully man. The Hollow King's body looked forged from burned scales and shadow fire. Tattered wings dragged across broken towers behind him, while black flames leaked endlessly from cracks throughout his body like bleeding hatred. But his face was still horribly human. Ancient eyes swept across the ruined city until they landed on Seraphine, and the creature smiled. At last, he said. His voice sounded like thousands speaking together through fire. The hidden dragons recoiled instantly. Kael moved in front of Seraphine. The Hollow King laughed softly. You smell like her. Seraphine's pulse stood up. The Spirit Queen's expression became ice. Do not speak of me. The Hollow King tilted his head mockingly. My beautiful queen. The ruins shook violently. Kael's fire exploded around him. You knew him. Seraphine whispered toward the spirit. Pain crossed the Spirit Queen's face. Once. The Hollow King's smile widened. We were meant to unite the clans together. His burning eyes locked onto Seraphine. Before fear poisoned weaker hearts. The truth crashed into Seraphine instantly. He had once carried the first flame, too. The Spirit Queen closed her eyes briefly. He chose power over balance. The Hollow King's expression twisted. I chose survival. You chose domination. I chose not to kneel. Black fire erupted violently across the ruins. Several surviving dragons screamed as corruption spread through them instantly. Kael roared and launched himself forward. The Hollow King met him head-on. The collision shattered entire towers. Dragonfire and corrupted shadow exploded across the city in a catastrophic storm. Seraphine watched in horror as Kael fought the creature through burning ruins, claws and fire ripping through ancient stone. But something was wrong. The Hollow King was getting stronger. Every burst of fear around the city fed him. Every terrified heartbeat. Every ounce of hatred. The Spirit Queen turned urgently toward Seraphine. You must complete the bond now. Seraphine froze. What? The spirit looked toward Kael, fighting desperately against the corruption. Only united flame can stop him. Kale slammed into a shattered tower as black fire consumed half the street around him. The Hollow King laughed. He fears loving you more than death itself. The words struck brutally true. Seraphine looked toward Kyle, toward the man who had spent his entire life terrified that love would destroy everything again. Then Kyle looked back at her through the flames, and she saw it. Not fear of the Hollow King, fear of losing her. The realization broke the final wall between them. Seraphine stepped forward into the fire. "Seraphine," Kale roared. But she kept walking. The black flames rose around her like wings, and above the ruined city, every dragon lifted its head toward their queen. The fire parted for her. Black flames curled around Seraphine's body in enormous spiraling wings as she walked through the ruined city toward the battle, tearing the mountain apart. Ancient stone melted beneath corrupted fire. Dragons screamed overhead. Survivors fled through collapsing streets, while the Hollow King's laughter echoed endlessly through the caverns below Dravenhold. Yet none of the flames touched her. The first flame recognized its queen. Kyle saw her approaching, and fury ripped through him instantly. "Seraphine, stop." The Hollow King struck him hard enough to send the Dragon King crashing through a shattered tower. Stone exploded around Kale's massive dragon form as black corruption spread further across his scales. The Hollow King smiled. "There," he purred softly. "That fear again." Seraphine understood now. The creature didn't merely feed on terror. It hunted emotional wounds. Grief, rage, loneliness, anything abandoned long enough to rot. That was why Kale was vulnerable. And perhaps that was why Seraphine was not. Because despite everything done to her, she had never allowed suffering to become cruelty. The Spirit Queen appeared beside her briefly within the fire. Balance was never weakness. The Hollow King turned fully towards Seraphine at last. Ancient burning eyes studied her with fascination. "You truly are like her." "I'm not." "No," he agreed softly. "You are gentler." The ruined city trembled. Kale rose again behind collapsing debris, blood and fire pouring from wounds across his dragon form. "Don't listen to him." The Hollow King ignored the warning. "They called me monster too once," he said to Seraphine. "Before I learned monsters survive longer than martyrs." Seraphine stopped, several yards away from him. The heat pouring from the creature felt wrong. Not alive, not natural, like endless fury burning without warmth. "You chose this," she said quietly. Pain flickered across the Hollow King's face. Only for a heartbeat. Then hatred buried it again. "I chose not to watch my people kneel. You chose fear over trust. And your precious balance brought peace?" he snarled. "Look around you." Black fire erupted violently across the ruined city. Kings murdered queens. Dragons slaughtered dragons. Humans betrayed humans. His voice thundered louder. "This world has always belonged to fear." Kale lunged again. The Hollow King caught him by the throat. Corruption exploded across Kale's scales instantly. The Dragon King screamed. Seraphine's heart stopped. "Kyle." The Hollow King held him suspended above the burning ruins, while black fire spread rapidly through his body. "Watch closely, little queen," the creature whispered. "Love always burns first." The corruption reached Kyle's eyes. Golden fire darkened. Black veins spread violently across his face. The hidden dragons recoiled in terror. Seraphine moved instantly. The first flame erupted around her body. Black wings of living fire exploded across the city, swallowing corrupted flames whole as Seraphine reached toward Kale. The Hollow King smiled darkly. "Yes, choose him." Seraphine touched Kyle's face, and the bond ignited. The world disappeared. Fire swallowed everything. Suddenly, Seraphine stood somewhere else entirely. A memory. Kale's memory. A young boy knelt beside a prison chamber beneath Dravenhold, while soldiers dragged a screaming woman toward moonfire chains. Black flames curled weakly around the woman's wrists. Kale's mother. The child begged his father to stop them. The Dragon King of that age fell to his knees before the council. Actually begged. "Please." The memory shattered Seraphine's heart. proud kings were never supposed to beg. Yet Kael's father did. For love. The council condemned the queen anyway. Young Kael watched his mother burn alive, while the kingdom called it justice. The memory shifted violently. Kael older now, covered in blood after war, standing alone beside a battlefield, while nobles whispered the same words endlessly behind him. Corrupted blood. Weak king. Monster heir. Memory after memory flooded Seraphine all at once. Kael, alone, always alone, ruling a kingdom terrified of him, punishing himself whenever mercy failed, refusing love, because love had already destroyed his family once. The final memory struck hardest. Kael, standing outside Seraphine's chamber weeks earlier after the tribute ceremony, unable to leave, unable to enter, watching her door all night because assassins had already begun moving through the castle, protecting her before he even understood why. The bond shattered open completely then. Seraphine returned to the ruined city gasping. Kael collapsed beside her onto the broken stone. The corruption stopped spreading. The Hollow King stared in disbelief. No. The black flames around Seraphine and Kael merged together now. Not separate anymore. Balanced. Crimson royal fire intertwined with black first flame in spiraling currents across the city. Every dragon lifted its head sharply. The hidden brood roared as one. The bond had awakened fully. Kael looked up at Seraphine in shock. You saw... Yes. Pain crossed his face instantly. Seraphine, you loved me long before you admitted it. Silence. Even the Hollow King froze briefly. Kael's expression cracked completely then. Years of restraint. Years of grief. Years of terror. All breaking apart beneath one unbearable truth. Yes, he whispered hoarsely. The word hit harder than any declaration ever could, because it sounded like surrender. Not weakness. Trust. The Hollow King roared furiously. Love is a chain. No, Seraphine said quietly. Fear is. The first flame exploded outward. Ancient runes across the ruined city awakened all at once. The hidden dragons bowed. Above the mountain, corrupted dragons screamed as black fire spread through the skies. The Hollow King staggered backward for the first time. You cannot save them all. Maybe not. Seraphine stepped beside Kael fully now. But we can stop abandoning them. The creature laughed bitterly. You think compassion cures corruption? No. Kael rose slowly beside her, crimson, black fire burning in his eyes now. But isolation feeds it. The Hollow King's expression twisted. Because somewhere deep beneath the monster, those words hurt. The Spirit Queen appeared behind Seraphine and Kael together. At last, united flame. The Hollow King roared and unleashed a catastrophic wave of corrupted fire across the city. Kael and Seraphine answered together. Black and crimson flames merged completely into a single enormous torrent of balanced fire. The collision shattered the ruins. Ancient towers collapsed. Dragons screamed overhead. The mountain itself cracked open as two ancient powers slammed against each other beneath Dravenhold. But slowly, the hollow flame began losing ground. Not because Seraphine and Kael were stronger. Because the corruption could not consume balanced fire. The Hollow King realized it too late. Fear flashed across his burning face. No. The merged flames engulfed him completely. The creature screamed, and suddenly Seraphine felt everything inside him. Not merely rage, not merely hatred. Grief. Endless, unbearable grief. A king terrified his people would disappear. A man who chose domination because vulnerability once made him powerless. A soul abandoned so completely it consumed itself, trying never to feel helpless again. Tears filled Seraphine's eyes. The Hollow King looked at her in shock. No one had pitied him in centuries. The creature's monstrous form faltered. You, he whispered brokenly. Seraphine stepped closer through the fire. You were alone too. The Hollow King's body cracked violently. Black corruption poured from the fractures like smoke. I tried to save them. The Spirit Queen closed her eyes sadly. I know. The Hollow King collapsed to his knees. For the first time, the monster looked tired. Not evil, just exhausted. Kale approached slowly beside Seraphine. The Hollow King looked up at them both through fading corruption. "All this suffering," he whispered, "for nothing." Kyle's expression remained hard, but not cruel. "No," the Dragon King said quietly. "Not for nothing." The Hollow King stared at the united flames surrounding them. Then, finally, after centuries of hatred, let go. The corruption shattered. Black fire exploded upward through the cavern roof and across the skies above Dravenhold like a storm breaking apart. Every corrupted dragon screamed simultaneously. Then silence fell. Pure silence. The Hollow King's body dissolved slowly into silver ash. And beneath the ruined city, the ancient mountain finally stopped shaking. Far above them, dawn began rising over Dravenhold. Dawn touched Dravenhold like forgiveness. For the first time in centuries, no dragon screamed above the mountain. The corrupted fire choking the skies had vanished with the Hollow King's death, leaving only cold morning clouds drifting across shattered towers and broken battlements. Ash fell softly through the ruined city beneath the mountain, while survivors emerged slowly from collapsed streets and temple halls, blinking into the strange silence that followed catastrophe. The war was over, but kingdoms did not heal as quickly as wounds. Seraphine stood at the highest remaining balcony of Dravenhold beside Kale, while dragons circled overhead in slow, solemn patterns. The mountain fortress had been scarred deeply during the night. Entire sections of the royal citadel lay in ruins. Temple spires had collapsed into black valleys below. Smoke still curled from distant towers, and everywhere, people watched her, not with simple fear anymore, with uncertainty. Some knelt when she passed. Others lowered their eyes. A few still looked terrified. Seraphine understood all of them, because truth did not erase generations of hatred in a single sunrise. Below the balcony, thousands had gathered inside the fractured throne courtyard. Dragon clans, soldiers, temple survivors, servants, riders, noble houses. The kingdom waited, not merely for answers, for judgment. Valor approached through the ruined hall behind them. The scarred commander looked exhausted, one arm wrapped in blood-stained cloth, but he bowed deeply before Kale. "The council chambers are secured," he said. "Most surviving lords await your command." Most surviving lords. The chancellor had died beneath the collapsing prison levels during the final battle. Several council members fled during the chaos. Others now waited below, praying the Dragon King would not slaughter them publicly. Kael's expression remained unreadable. "Eira?" he asked. Valor hesitated slightly. "Alive." That surprised Seraphine. Kael noticed her reaction. "You expected execution?" "She tried to have me killed." "Yes, but she also helped protect civilians during the collapse." Kael studied her quietly. "You still look for reasons to spare people." "Someone should." Something softer flickered behind his eyes. "Note amusement. Admiration." The kind that frightened him more. Before either could speak again, another roar echoed above the mountain. Seraphine looked upward instinctively. The hidden dragons had emerged. Massive ancient beasts circled the fortress openly now beside the royal dragons of Dravenhold. Black, silver, crimson, and white wings filled the sky together for the first time in recorded history. The kingdom below stared upward in awe, not because dragons were rare, because the hidden brood bowed to no crown. Yet today, they flew above Dravenhold willingly. Kale exhaled slowly beside her. "The clans are going to panic." Seraphine glanced toward him carefully. "And you?" His golden eyes met hers. "I already did." The honesty startled a laugh out of her before she could stop it. A real laugh. Small. Exhausted. "Oman." Kale looked visibly startled by the sound. Then, something impossible happened. The Dragon King smiled. Not the bitter half-smirks she had seen before. Not cold amusement. An actual smile. It changed his entire face. And suddenly Seraphine understood how dangerous he might have been If the kingdom had allowed him happiness sooner. The moment shattered quickly as horns sounded below. The public assembly had begun. Kael's expression hardened again immediately. King, warrior, Wula. But when he offered Seraphine his hand this time, there was no coldness in the gesture. Only choice. She took it. Together, they descended into the ruined throne courtyard. Thousands fell silent, instantly. The shattered ashen throne still stood at the center of the courtyard beneath torn royal banners. Cracks split the marble platform from top to bottom after the mountain collapse. Black scorch marks stained the surrounding stone. A broken kingdom, waiting beneath a broken throne. Fitting. Kael ascended the platform first, Seraphine beside him. Murmurs spread instantly through the gathered clans at the sight of the black flames moving softly around her wrists. Some dragons lowered their heads immediately. Others hesitated. The remaining council lords stood near the front, surrounded by guards. Fear lived openly across their faces now. Kael's voice thundered across the courtyard. Last night this kingdom learned the truth. Silence deepened. The histories you were taught were lies. Shock rippled through the nobles even though many already suspected it. Kael continued coldly. The first flame bloodline did not seek domination. They sought balance between dragons and humans. His gaze sharpened toward the surviving council members. And they were murdered for it. No one interrupted him. Not anymore. The Dragon King stepped aside slightly then, not above Seraphine. Beside her. The gesture alone sent murmurs through the crowd. Kael looked directly at the kingdom and said the words no ruler before him had dared speak publicly. My queen carries the bloodline you feared. The courtyard tensed, but before panic could spread, Kael drew his sword. Gasps erupted instantly. Then the Dragon King knelt, directly before Seraphine. The entire kingdom froze. Valor's eyes widened. Temple warriors stared in disbelief. Even the dragons overhead roared sharply. No Dragon King knelt. Not to council, not to gods, and never publicly. Kael lowered his blade before her feet. My kingdom taught me fear, before it taught me loyalty, he said, voice carrying across the ruined fortress. It taught me power before compassion. It taught me to bury grief until it became rage. Silence crushed the courtyard. Then Kael looked up at Seraphine. But this woman carried suffering without becoming cruel. His voice roughened slightly. She walked into fire to save a kingdom that hated her. Seraphine felt tears burn suddenly behind her eyes. Kael continued. I spent my life believing love would destroy everything I touched. He swallowed once. I was wrong. The courtyard remained utterly still. And then, before all the clans, the Dragon King bowed his head fully. My queen, he said quietly. Forgive the throne that failed you. A sound broke somewhere within the crowd. A servant crying. Then another. Because everyone understood what this truly meant. The most feared king in the realm had just condemned his own kingdom's sins publicly. Seraphine's chest ached unbearably. Slowly, she knelt before him too. Not above him. Beside him. And she lifted his face gently with trembling hands. We rebuild it together, she whispered. Kael closed his eyes briefly at her touch. Relief. Real relief. As though he had been carrying the weight of the mountain alone for years, and only now realized someone else had chosen to stand beside him willingly. Then the dragons bowed. All of them. The hidden brood. The royal dragons. Every beast across the mountain lowered their heads toward the throne courtyard simultaneously. The kingdom witnessed it together. Not submission through fear. Recognition. The first flame had returned, and it chose balance instead of vengeance. The reaction spread slowly at first. One soldier knelt. Then another. Temple survivors lowered their weapons. Servants bowed their heads. Finally, Valor himself dropped to one knee before Seraphine and Kael both. The rest followed, like falling stone. An entire kingdom kneeling together. Not before conquest. Before truth. Only Alira remained standing. The high priestess approached the shattered throne platform slowly, while the crowd watched nervously. Her silver robes were torn and stained with ash. She looked older somehow. Smela. She stopped before Seraphine, then removed the moonstone crown marking her as temple leader, and placed it at Seraphine's feet. The old temple betrayed the balance it was sworn to protect, Elira said quietly. If judgment is owed, let it fall upon me. Kael's expression hardened slightly, but Seraphine remembered the priestess carrying wounded children through collapsing halls while dragons burned overhead. Fear had ruled Elira too, not malice. Seraphine bent slowly and lifted the crown, then placed it back into Elira's hands. Gasps spread through the crowd. You do not rebuild truth with another execution, Seraphine said softly. Elira stared at her, in stunned silence. Tears filled the priestess's eyes, and for the first time in centuries, the Moon Temple bowed willingly to the first Flame Queen. Weeks passed. Dravenhold rebuilt slowly, painfully. The mountain remained scarred, but life returned piece by piece. Humans and dragon clans worked side by side, repairing shattered towers. The hidden dragons no longer hid beneath the mountain. Children watched them in awe from the courtyards. Not everything healed easily. Some clans still distrusted Seraphine. Some humans still feared dragons. But fear no longer ruled openly from the throne. That alone changed everything. And Kael. Kael changed most of all. Not softer. Never weak. The Dragon King remained terrifying when angered. Courts still fell silent when he entered. Enemies still feared his wrath. But now the kingdom also saw something else. The king laughing quietly beside his queen during council feasts. The king walking through rebuilt villages without guards. The king allowing hatchling dragons to perch on the throne platform because Seraphine found it amusing. Hope transformed him more dangerously than rage ever had. Then winter came, and with it, new life. The royal birth chamber stood silent except for the crackling fire surrounding the crystal egg, resting within Seraphine's arms. Kael knelt beside her while temple healers watched nervously from a distance. The egg glowed softly, beneath black and crimson fire intertwined together. Balanced flame. The child moved inside. Kael's hand tightened around Seraphine's. You're certain about this? He murmured quietly. She smiled faintly. Terrified, actually. Good. He kissed her forehead gently. I mistrust fearless people. The egg cracked. Light spilled through the chamber. Black flames rose softly into the air. But this time, no one screamed. The hatchling opened bright golden eyes inside swirling dark fire, while tiny dragon wings unfolded against Seraphine's chest. And instead of fear, the entire chamber bowed. Because prophecy had not ended with destruction. It had ended with a family the kingdom finally chose not to burn. Far above Dravenhold, dragons roared across the winter sky, while snow fell softly over the mountain kingdom reborn from ash. And upon the restored throne of fire and stone, the Dragon King chose his wife and child over fear. This time, the kingdom chose them too.